I am truly honored and privileged to introduce our first guest speaker for today, Debora Fletcher. She's the founder and president of Sustainable Families Group. She studied at Brigham Young University. She's married with 10 children and 3 grandchildren. She's an international speaker, trainer, and avid storyteller, passionate about uplifting humanity, women focused, current projects in Guatemala and the Middle East, and travels the world, every continent except for Antarctica.
Excited to talk to you today. I mentioned to you that I wanted to talk about the healing power of motherhood. As you can see from my bio, I am a mother. Before anything else, I am a mother, and it's my most delightful and sometimes the most painful role that I play. I am today. I would like to just remind you about something you already know. We know that there was a creation, right? We all know that Genesis is the beginning of our gospel. And sometimes we forget that in that creation, if you think about the whole history of Christianity, there was also a fall. We know that Adam fell. We know that Eve was also part of this picture, right? We women were invited to this creation from the beginning. But then after the fall, what happened? There was a redemption. And that's why we worship our Christ. That's why we honor him. That's why we are so grateful to God, the Father, for being willing to give his Son to us, imperfect people. Okay, so how does this relate to motherhood? Because I mentioned I would like to talk about the healing power of motherhood. Okay, so here's my 2 cents. Think about this 3 pillars of eternity is what I like calling this phenomenon. Creation, we are going up and it's wonderful, right? Fall, and sometimes we fall and sometimes we keep falling and we don't know if we're ever going to get out of that hole, and it's so deep. And then comes the light and the faith and the atonement. In motherhood is very similar. I don't know if any of you have teenagers, but I do, and I've had my share of teenagers. I have 8 sons in a row, and then 2 little daughters, and they are home now. Prom was last night, so you imagine my fear of my beautiful little girl, the second prom she goes to, and I'm thinking, please don't fall, right? Please don't fall. And I'm praying, making sure after midnight that she makes it home and everything is good. But there's a time in a human development that we start to really choose for ourselves. I think, according to the experts, it's around 8 years old, and that's when it gets really painful to be a mother. For you young mothers, don't be afraid; you'll make it through. And if you haven't been a mother, it's not necessary to learn the lessons only through motherhood, because I believe we as women have a natural desire to nurture. We have a gift to nurture. Today, we're being mothers to each other. We are teaching, we are encouraging, we're nurturing each other. Okay, so here we go. Let's talk about the creation part. And we all know the fall. We'll deal with that later. But let's talk about the creation part. If we were in a room together, I could ask you and you can tell me the story. At the end of the day, God was creating a perfect garden, a beautiful place where his children, male and female, could live, right? And you could tell me every day what he created, what he created the next day, and how Adam and Eve were given the opportunity to choose, and they chose, Eve especially chose to take the fruit, right? And that's when we see the fall happening. And then they were taken out of that perfect world and into a real world, our real world right now. Okay, so these are no news to you, right? You're all Christians, you get it. But what I would like to emphasize about the creation today is that there is a pattern. There is a pattern that if we look closely, there are action items, action things that God Himself used. So if I was creating something, I would go to the expert, right? If I was making a wedding cake, I will go to my neighbor who makes wedding cakes and I would ask her to guide me how to do it right because she has done it many times. So if I was creating a family, I was creating a future, I was creating a dream, if I was creating a company, it doesn't really matter. But today we're going to talk about it in the context of motherhood. I know it's early in the morning. Stay with me. Make sure this is going to be interesting. I think you will enjoy it because we all have the power to create every single day, every single moment of the day, because pretty much everything about life is about choosing. And choice has to do with everything that we learn from the story in Genesis. Okay, before we can create anything. So there are 7 steps, just like the 7 days, right? We know that. And 7 is a perfect number. But before we can create anything, we need to be able to have faith to do it. We have to have a clean heart and clean hands. I am not saying that we need to be perfect, right? Because nobody's perfect. Nobody is like God, or we wouldn't need Him. We wouldn't need His redemption. And we wouldn't need each other, and we wouldn't have anything to learn. So, guys, if any of you feel like you're perfect, you gotta check that. Just check that and see when was the last time. Anyway, just think about the beautiful side of this. When we have faith and we are able to desire to create, we are clean, right? So that's the preliminary stage. Christ was clean. He was perfect. We don't have to. God was perfect. We don't have to yet. We're working on it. Okay, so the first day. One of the things that strikes me really interesting about this is that when the Creator showed up, it was chaos. It was darkness. It was mess. There was no order. There was nothing, right? It was a void, according to the scriptures. Do you ever feel that you are in a void? Do you ever feel that there's chaos in your life and you will never recover? And that your kid will never behave again, your house will never be clean again, after your baby, your body will never heal? I felt that many, many times. But just like with God, when He had chaos and He had just the elements, He surveyed the elements. He figured out, what do I have? I mean, I don't know, I wasn't there, but I'm just thinking logically. So that's, to me, very important for us to see. Okay, I see. I'm in Australia and I just caused an accident that could have killed my daughter. And that really did happen. And I might connect that story to what I'm trying to share with you today. So imagine that moment. You're sitting in the middle of nowhere in a country you don't know, without cell service, and you had just been hit by a truck. Of course, it was my fault because I turned left and an American turns left really wide. And it was the wrong side of the road, right? But I was feeling a little too cocky that I could do this because I had driven in London, I had driven in Australia several times, and this morning I was feeling happy and enjoying that we were going home, and we had plans for the day. Anyway, so picture that. So what is the first thing? We have to have faith that whatever it is that is thrown to us is going to work out. And luckily, I had prepared myself for 50 years. I knew the word of God and I felt at peace. And I was able to pray an interesting prayer. Remember, this we're still on the first day. There's chaos. And we're going to take that chaos and we're going to organize it. And that prayer was very different than any prayer I prayed. And I can tell you, it came from my heart. It wasn't necessarily coming from my mind. And this prayer said, please, Heavenly Father, help me to accept thy will and to be strong enough to receive it, right? Okay. How does that relate to organize the first day? I would love to hear your answers if you were there, if you were in the same room. But if you think about it, organize really has to do with what is the ultimate thing that I want. At the end of the day, in this event or in this moment, in this tragedy, and whatever we want to call it, in this life, how do I want to organize my life lined up with faith and principles of Christ to have it be a successful life, to be a successful outcome for this moment, my daughter to be able to live. I didn't know if she was going to live. Her head was split really wide and really deep. Okay, so what is the next day? What is the next thing that happens in a creation story? Beautify. Can you imagine if we just lived in a place that was a tundra, that it was practical and organized and just right, but there was no beauty? Could you live through the year if you only were in winter? Like Tolstoy said, always winter and never Christmas. Okay, so we talked about being clean, having the faith to do this, having the desire to know that we can. That's the beginning, right? Then the next time we need to organize whatever thing happened to us. We need to dream beyond that, see beyond the idea that we just had an accident, or that our house is messy, or that teenager is not going to make it, or that we lost our job, or COVID, whatever that is. Okay, so the beautify. How would you beautify? In the case of God, he put plants and flowers and birds, and he did all kinds of beautiful things for us to enjoy life. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of life is to be tested, yes, and to be follow Christ, yes, and to love, yes, but we need to find joy. And it's very hard to find joy without beauty. So in my case, in my home, with the 8 sons, I imagine, you can imagine what kind of mess my life would be if I didn't organize it, right? They all had jobs, they all know how to sew, they know how to clean, they know how to do all kinds of stuff. So that happened. But it had to be beautiful, even though I only had men for a very, very long time. And sometimes men don't seem to care about beauty, right? I don't know why. But my desire as the only female in a household of 9 males was to have beauty. So decorating and matching dishes and pretty clothes and whatever it was. Okay, so let's go to the next step. He divided, we're talking about God and the creation, right? He divided the light from the darkness. Sometimes we forget this. We forget that there is day and there is night. There are painful things and there are dark things, but there are beautiful things full of light. So I am sure you have heard the idea that you are able to harvest the things that you water, right? So if you want to be happy and successful, I think I would choose light, right? I think most of us wouldn't choose night, even though I love night. I am exhausted every day and I go to bed and I'm happy to have the night, but I wouldn't want to live in darkness. So it is a choice. Everything about the creation, everything about the creator is about choice. And in motherhood, as in life and womanhood, we have the choice. And if we can divide the light from the darkness and choose the light, our lives would be a lot happier. Okay, how do we put this into an example? Okay, so I had a teenager and several, but one of them was particularly difficult. And it was hard for me to watch this boy kind of destroy his life. And I remember that as if it was today. It's been 15 years. And I was so consumed by that idea, the darkness of the idea that this boy was going the wrong direction and choosing everything that I had taught him not to do. I felt broken. I felt in dark. I couldn't sleep. And I was so obsessed with it. My husband finally said, you know what? I know you love your boy, but you've got to choose the light. You've got to choose the things that are good. Look at your newborn baby. By then, I had my two little girls. And I had just given birth to my youngest daughter, Rose. And he said, your baby needs you. You need to be happy. You need to not blame yourself. You need to move on. But how can one move on from that kind of thing? Knowing that my life's work was to be a mother and to teach and to love and to inspire. And then little by little, it literally took me 10 years to get over the idea that I had done something wrong. I had taught. My job was to teach. Now let's think about God. And I don't mean this to be sacrilegious, right? We honor him. But he has some children that are disobedient. Wouldn't you say? You know a few. They're choosing things that they shouldn't choose, even after they have declared that they want to follow Christ. So how does he feel? Does he still turn on the sun? Does he still bring light? Does he still take care of other people who need him? And I thought, yes, it makes sense. He divides the light from the darkness, and he is able to choose light and move on and continue on for our sakes. Okay, all of you gardeners will love the next step. Remember, this is all about Eden and how Eden was built. In my very small human brain, this is how I see it. Okay, so now the earth is organized. The water is divided from the ground. There is a sky, there is an ocean, and there's night, there's dark, right? So the next thing he does, and he plants seeds, but he plants seeds of every kind, not just the flowers, not just the trees that give fruit. He even planted thorns and thistles. Remember that in Genesis? When Adam and Eve fell, and God said to Adam, you're going to have to work, and you're going to clean everything about the earth that is going to give you fruit. You have to work for it. And there'll be thorns and there'll be thistles, and you're going to have to pull them out. I think if we acknowledge that, nothing that we have done wrong or right, everybody has thorns in their life. Everybody has thistles. We have to deal with a difficult life because, more than anything else, this life is an education. Every single lesson that we have is going to be necessary for our progression. Now, if your mothers think about this, if you have a 2-year-old, let's say a 1-year-old, would you rather not have that baby walk? Because you know it's going to hurt. You know he's going to walk, and if he's potty trained early, he's going to fall, and there's no diaper to help him out. He might get a split lip, or he might get all kinds of injuries because he has to walk. No sane mother would keep the child from walking, right? Even though it might be painful. How about a teenager? Would you like to keep that kid in your house all the time and never let him go out? No dates, no high school. They might learn bad things. That would not help the child to progress. So I find it very wise that God planted seeds of everything, and it was up to us to grow the ones that are good for us, right? And to pull out the ones that are not. Okay. I love the next one. And it's after he had everything in place, including the seeds that he had planted, he commanded them to multiply. Isn't that interesting? So it was a self-sustaining world. It wasn't him planting a seed every day, and growing it and growing it. They were multiplying within their sphere and element. Not only were the seeds multiplying, but the animal. So, what I really find in applying this to life, and it goes together with the seeds. Let's say in motherhood, I planted seeds on my children to learn how to cook and clean and do all those simple things so that when I was getting older and I had too many to be able to keep up with the housework, they could grow those seeds of wanting to contribute, right? And those same seeds would be what they would use, the habits that they would use to enable them to be contributing citizens in their society at large. So with the multiplying, it also can imply in my mind that as you plant good seeds in your life and in the life of your children and the life of your company, in the life of anything that you are creating, those seeds are going to grow. It doesn't mean that there won't be weeds, because no matter what, there are always weeds. So we have to have the cycle of dividing the light from the darkness again and again, pulling out the bad, keeping out the good, right? Okay. And in the multiply part, I would also add the idea of being a team. I can do a lot. I have a lot of energy. Actually, my nickname as a child was Terremoto, which means earthquake, because I couldn't sit still. I had so much energy. I was going around and telling my parents, you can probably hear it in my voice. I had to slow down my voice because I have so many thoughts and I have to go and do and do and do. And eventually that gets people tired, right? Anyway, but it comes a time that you can no longer do everything yourself, and you shouldn't. We are here on earth to become one, just like Christ asked us to do. And he said, if you are not one, you are not mine. So let me do a little example, and I wish you were here with me again, and we can play this little game with a puzzle. So if I had a puzzle and we all had a piece, would it be important for all of us to put our piece in so we can see what the picture is, right? It would be very important. So does that imply then that as we multiply and as we create teams and things bigger than ourselves, like this conference, several people with several ideas, with several powerful things to share, then the puzzle is better than just a piece. The piece makes no sense, and it has ins and outs. Again, we're on multiply and becoming a team. Here's the thing about a puzzle that I'm sure you already have noticed, because we all have played with puzzles from the time we were children. And I cannot tell you how many puzzles we borrow from the library or bought for these children to be entertained and develop their brain, right? But in a puzzle, no piece is perfect. I will not take a piece and display it as something that is beautiful, right? Because it isn't. It doesn't make any sense. So each of us naturally have the ability to have weaknesses and strengths, right? We have weaknesses and strengths, which means that if I put my puzzle in with Terry, some of my strengths would help that gap that she has, and some of her strengths will come and fill up my gaps. So I call that confident vulnerability. And it has to do with motherhood. It has to do with life. And sometimes we women want to be so strong and so independent and so powerful that we behave like marbles. I don't know if you play with marbles, I had plenty of marbles growing up. I grew up in a country that didn't have a whole lot of toys. So we had simple toys in Guatemala, like marbles. And we would play and throw them at each other in a little battle on the ground. Okay? So what a marvel. If you have a marble here and Terry is the other marble, are we going to be able to bond? Pretty much there isn't. There isn't a way so that we can bond. Anyway, I am so excited to talk to you this morning, because if the world could behave as puzzles and we can multiply our efforts by becoming a team and using everybody's strengths, then the world would be a different place, right? We would understand that we need each other. We completely, completely need each other. God has given us gifts and he wants us to use it for each other, not just for ourselves. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So once there's multiplying in the garden, we had that crucial day when Eve was tempted to take the fruit, right? Why would you have chosen? Why would you have chosen? This was a choice. He said, I asked you not to take of this fruit, but it's up to you to take it. And we know the rest of the story, right? So this, I will say, I will call it in a positive way, pick the fruit. And that's step number 6, day number 6. Remember, we start with the clean step before anything happens. We are going to have faith. So pick up the fruit. Now you're there. Satan, this serpent is trying to tempt you. But I imagine, and this of course is not doctrine, because I know the Bible has many great things, but we might be, who knows, there are little details that maybe we humans couldn't comprehend, so they weren't written there. But she had to choose. What would have gone through her head? And this is what the way I see it, like, again, I hope I'm not being sacrilegious, but the way I see it, if it was me, if it was me sitting in the garden forever, that'd be fun, right? You get up, you take some sunshine, you eat some fruits, you do all these beautiful things, you maybe take a dip in the water, and then night comes and you lay down. No, I don't know that I could do that. I think that would be fairly meaningless after a while, because fruits just came, things just came, and I think God knew that if these people had a choice, maybe the choice of being able to take that fruit and having a new, more challenging, but more interesting life, maybe that was what she was thinking. I don't know. If there's another life, I would love to ask her. But we know that she chose, and she was kicked out of the garden, and Adam followed, which I believe is the greatest love story of all time. He had the perfect life. He didn't choose to take it, but he knew that she was more important than his comfortable life. So again, that goes with motherhood and marriage. How many times we sacrifice for each other, right? Okay, so she picked that fruit, and now she made a choice. And when choice is involved, pain usually follows, because choice is not easy. If it was a choice between good and good and good, great, But some of the things are very difficult to go through, even though they're the right thing. Like being a mother, that's a choice, right? Would it be easy for me not to be a mother? Would it be easy for any of us not to be a mother? Yeah, of course it would be. Would it even be easier for us to not even have to choose to get married? Yeah, right? Dealing with another human every day can get really difficult. Or maybe it's just my human. I'm pretty sure you all have had days that you think, why did I marry this guy again? And my husband is wonderful. Some of you know him, but I'm sure I have that effect on him too. I might be the sand on his oyster many times. Anyway, going back to picking the fruit. Here we have worked on creating a very useful life, a very multiplying and putting seeds for the future and all these great things as mothers. And now we got to pick that fruit, right? When that fruit is ripe, we move on and we do a new thing. And here's the last day. So I think this is probably perhaps the most important day. And we know what, if I asked you, what did God do when he finished his work after 6 days of coming and going and doing and organizing and beautifying and dividing the light from the darkness and planting seeds and having them multiply and then creating Adam and Eve in his image. Now imagine seeing them pick that fruit and knowing that they will be out of that place and that the new place was going to be painful, right? What would you do? What do you do? When you get your teenager out the door and they go to college and then you're like, whoa, I picked that fruit, I grew it, and it's got some bruises in some parts, but it's mostly good. And I'm going to let that fruit go out there in the world. And he's going to hopefully create a good life for himself or herself. I haven't done that with the girls yet. They are still 17 and 15. Should we be resting? Should we be resting like God did? I'm asking it in a sarcastic way because we women think that resting is not for us. Oh, no, no. We work all day at home or in an office or online, whatever we work. And then at night, who cleans? Who cooks? Who puts the children to bed? Right? We continue our work day and night and day and night, and we still feel guilty if our little fruits fall off the tree or have little bruises or bugs that bite them, right? God himself rested. You know how long it's taken me to believe that I can do this. I love that he rested. He didn't rest the whole time. None of us are like the kind of person that will be resting the whole time, or we all be asleep. We wouldn't be right here, right? We'll be in our beds still dreaming that life is easy and we don't have to work. But we work, and we work hard. So I recommend, sisters, don't forget to rest. Don't forget to rest. And while we're resting, let's do something else. We have gone through how to bring the creation out there the way that God would have brought it. And I believe that as we study this most important story or a detail of the creation, we can apply it to ourselves, to our lives, and how we create. We create in different ways. This is the way I see my creating, that I can see those patterns and I use them in my creating, and that works for me. I'm not saying it might work for you, but I thought I would share this morning because there's that healing and a power in being a mother that allows you to do things for other people that you probably wouldn't have done unless you love those people that you brought to the world, right? Okay, so here's the last part that I believe is very important. In the resting, we need to be doing recording. Someday you come to my house, you're invited. I'll show you my little office and how it just is filled with journals, because we humans tend to forget. So I would say the R for resting should remind us of recording, right? So that we can remember. One of the words that is most frequent in the Bible outside of Christ is the word remember. Isn't that interesting? How we are able to remember very little. And that's why we take the sacrament. That's why we go to church. That's why we read our scriptures. And it has to be a daily thing because we humans forget way too easily. So I invite you, sisters, to follow your creation path. Start by that feeling that you are worthy, because you are. We are children of God, and he never expected us to be perfect on day one or even on day 53 years old. He wants us to lean on him, to learn from him, because even Paul, one of my favorite prophets, was always complaining. I mean, he was talking about he had a thorn on the flesh. That means he wasn't perfect, right? So I am just so grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you. And I am so grateful that we get to meet. And I would love to see how we can communicate, because we all have stories to tell. We all have experiences that have changed us and allowed us to become who we are. And remember, we are puzzle pieces. We are part of the great plan of God, and we are allowed and able to lean on each other. And that's why we're here this morning. And I'm so grateful that I can speak to you for a moment. I wonder if there are any comments, any questions that people might want to ask. I do international development. My passion is motherhood. And I did study family science and psychology and international development together, because I don't think that we can change the course of history and the world unless we understand people's minds, right? And of course, we do not live in an island. We live as families, and that is the first and most important society that we live in. And yes, sometimes it's difficult. Divorce is real, abuse is real, childlessness is real, and sometimes we belong to wonderful families that have figured it out through the generations, but sometimes we don't, and that's okay. That's okay. We need to live as groups, and then the idea that we can pull together is, to me, one of the most precious things that we learn from Christ. Do you remember when he came back after he was resurrected and he was eating on the side on the shore while the apostles were fishing all night and fishing and fishing, and he was making them food? Do you remember that? I think it's a beautiful story. So they could see somebody in the distance, and they went to see who it was. And after they were and talked to him, they realized it was Christ, and he had made them food. How cool is that? We mothers nurture. We mothers make food. And that saves people's life, right? What did Christ say to them? I think if we were in the same room, you could tell me that message that Christ shared was, if you love me, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Are our children his sheep? Our neighbors, our friends, are they his sheep? So if we are feeding them, of course, we feed them food, and we also feed them love and knowledge and opportunity and all the things that we do to sacrifice for them. So I am just very, very grateful that we can have this conversation.
I am so blessed by your information you just shared, how you intertwine the Word of God and motherhood. So many people don't understand how it connects. And so it was beautiful how you broke it down. So I thank God for you and thank God for your powerful message. But if you could just expound, we have some minutes to go. So I would just love for you to share a little bit more about your daughter in that crash and how God just miraculously turned that around. I recall getting the email the minute it happened. I think Terry sent it out to Facebook, and we immediately started praying for your daughter. And I saw pictures and I was devastated because I was like, God, you're a healer, you're a deliverer. You know how to make a way. You know how to bring this girl back to life and just bring, because I know she was on the verge of death. And that's what just shook my inner core. So I would love for you just to share a little bit more about the journey at a high level, if you don't mind.
So as part of my passion to help bring the word of God to the world, I believe that the best way to do it is through the family. But families have a hard time in places where there have been abused for so long, or neglect, or difficult governments, and families struggle to feed themselves. So if you struggle to feed yourself and everything that you do every day is just, okay, where do I get my next tortilla? And I'm not trying to be racist here. I'm actually from Guatemala. And Guatemala is the hungriest place in all of America. Outside of India, Guatemala is it. So in 2019, I decided that as part of my education and paying my own way, I would go and research what other people had done all over the world to end extreme poverty, which comes with extreme hunger and all kinds of problems, right? So I went to an event that I was invited to at the UN in Geneva, Switzerland. And in that event, there were people that were sharing their success all over the world. That's why I ended up traveling to so many countries. So there were people from every continent, like I said, except Antarctica. And I was glad because I don't like cold. We Guatemalans like the warmth. And anyway, so I went, and after everybody pretty much said, hey, do you want to come see my project? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I would love to see it in person. Anybody can read anything in a book, and I can write anything in a book, right? But it's hard to fake it when you are in town. And if I show up to Terry's house and she said, "Oh, I have this house that has this perfect this and perfect that," and I show up and there isn't perfect, and I know that maybe she was stretching the truth. Not that she would, because Terry's amazing. But anyway, so I got in this journey, and I started to travel all over the world. And within 3 months, I had traveled the 12 countries they invited me to, including Jordan. I was told by the assistant to the king of Jordan to come visit and that she would introduce me to the king. And of course, I am such a social animal. I decided to bring 14 people with me. If I was going to have the opportunity to do something, I would go and bring other people for a couple of reasons. Because I like company, right? But also because sometimes we need a whole puzzle of people to understand something. And if I brought witnesses, people that could see, like Christ did, right? He did everywhere he went with the 12. Once in a while, he was on his own, but a lot of the time he was with other people because they could connect to different people. I don't know, because they could see things maybe, of course, he could see everything. But I'm thinking in their case, Peter and Paul and all of them had to work together so they could see other things. And of course, Paul wasn't even in the 12 because he didn't join until after Christ was born. Anyway, you guys know the doctrine. But okay, so imagine this. It's been exhausting. I have never left my children before. I have been really a full-time mother, but I want to find a way to still contribute to the world until I can go full-time. And their last stop after Jordan, and I did take my little 14-year-old. She's 15 now. She was 12, and this is the girl that had the accident. As had been my closest friend, my sweetest little girl, her whole life. And this summer and that year that I felt that I needed to go to all these places, there had been 3 months, not necessarily in a row. I would be here on and off through the summer. And I had my daughter-in-law and my family hang out with her and everything. But I think it was so hard on her that she was angry. And that was really difficult for me because here was my baby. Didn't want to talk to me. Didn't want anything to do with me. All of a sudden, she might have felt abandoned. I don't know. I'm sure you all have had that moment when you know that you have to do something that doesn't fit with your comfort zone or the people around you who are comfortable with having a full-time mom, right? Think about it, free rides, free food, free cleaning, free everything, free hugs. And this kid was so sweet. She would sleep in my bed half the time. She was my height, but she still loved her mama. So anyway, so I took her with me to Jordan because I was worried that she was very angry. She really was frustrated and didn't know how to deal with this new version of her mother. And through the whole time in Jordan, she was like, I don't like you. And there, of course, there are 14 very important people that I brought with me because I wanted to support this woman's project. If she brought me to visit her project, I wanted to bring people who could be an asset to her. And I noticed during that time that she wore a sweatshirt. And I don't know if you have been to Egypt, but it's hot. And this was like September, October. She was being homeschooled so I can reconnect with her. And she had this hoodie, all the way down on her sleeves, hot with her hood on. And we're in the Valley of the Kings, which is like 1,000 degrees. And you go inside these tombs all the way into the ground and still humid. That's was 2019, before COVID, right? And she wouldn't take off the hoodie. And that was weird. She wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't let me take pictures. And I was distraught. I thought, okay, God, if you want me to really do this, you need to help me figure out how I'm going to reconnect with my child because I want to put you as a first priority. And I do want to find out how to help my Guatemalan people get out of poverty. And I have one more country to visit, but my child comes first. You gave me this child and I did not bring this child here to have her be angry at me and feel that she's not important. Anyway, so that's just the background. Okay, so we get home from that trip and she's still not having it. She didn't care to eat the food. She didn't wear a sweatshirt. And I'll tell you, I'll spoil the story a little bit. Part of the reason she was unwilling to take off her sweatshirt is because she was cutting. Oh my gosh, this is my full-time life, right? This is my full-time life. I have had I even study family science, I study psychology, I study all this, and here's my own child, my youngest, whom I should have some experience, right, on raising children, and there she's cutting. And I didn't find that out until we get to the hospital months later in Australia, but just didn't want to forget to tell you that. And the other thing is that she had some kind of eating disorder. But having her, I did feel inspired to bring her, even though she was a pain and it was uncomfortable and frustrating because she was mostly just grumpy the whole time. And I've learned to not worry about what my friends think about my children, because sometimes we think the children are a reflection of us, and they are to an extent, but they still have their own mind, right? And they'll probably, I've had enough 2-year-olds yell in the library and kick the librarian because they wanted to take something and I didn't want to let them. That I just learned not to be embarrassed by my children. But anyway, so we get into the plane to go to Australia, and I didn't want to leave her, but I had that last thing to do. And this thing was a training that I had started in February of that year. And the training was about being able to get a community and have the community contribute to the solution, right? Because sometimes we have the experts, the PhDs and the wealthy and whatever. They say, okay, this is the solutions we need for this little people because they don't know how to solve their own. That's not true. The people know what their problems are, and they are more likely to be engaged if they're part of it. Okay. So we go to Australia. There's a lady there. There's a contortionist girl that just written a book, and she happened to be from Australia. And it was the week after my training. So I said to Rose, okay, let's go do this. She loved the contortionist. I was trying to be her friend, and I was really not succeeding. And she said, maybe if you bring my cousin, her best friend. I'm like, okay, yeah. Tickets to Australia are expensive, but this is worth it, right? So I take the two of them. We go. We have this training, and they're bored to death. But they at least she was a lot more pleasant. She had her cousin. Long story short, the day the training ended, the next morning we get in the car and we were on our way to get this book that we were going to buy in Perth, Australia, get it signed, and it was about an hour drive, 2 hours actually, 2.5 hours drive, but no big deal, right? I've driven everywhere. So we get off the driveway, and like I mentioned earlier, I followed GPS, no problem. I ran into a couple of kangaroos, and then I turned left, and there was nothing. There were no roads. There were no cars really the whole week. But that time, this isn't funny, but I turned, and I just thought left turn. And not only was it a road that was two ways, it looked like a one-way road. It was two ways, and it was a highway, 65 miles an hour kind of highway. And it looks actually no wider than my neighborhood street that is not even a two-way road, right? Wow. So that moment comes, and I see the car, and the girl is asleep, and my niece is like, oh my gosh, Debora, Tia Debora, there's a car. And I am trying to react. And anyway, so the best I do is get off the road, right? But I get off the road on the wrong side, because in my American mind, that's the safe side. I can go on this side. You get hit, everything exploded. I mean, every one of those bags implode. I can't remember. Opens up. Sometimes my Spanish gets in the way. Anyway, and I'm saying that prayer as I'm walking out to see her, and she looked dead. She was asleep. I didn't know that. And my niece is like, come on, Rose, wake up. So just keeping her conscious. And then I was able to get my niece out, open the door, got her in an ambulance. The ambulance came about 30 minutes later, but there was they couldn't take my daughter. She was too fatal, to take in an ambulance. But the whole time, the 45 minutes I'm sitting with her on my lap, there are flies landing on her bloody forehead, and I am trying to fan them out. But my clavicle was broken with the car seat, with the seatbelt. It completely broke. I can still feel it. Not that you want to see it, but it's pretty gross. That moment was so important to me now that I look back, because I am praying, help me out, please help me out. I knew she was alive, right? And please help me do the best I can. I couldn't, she was on my lap. What would I have done? The reason the ambulance came is because somebody heard the crash, even though there was nobody in sight. All of a sudden, there's two angels. I don't know who they were. I know now, but I didn't then. They showed up. And it happened to be that one of them was a helicopter emergency person that happened to be home that day. He was supposed to work, but he ended up not going to work. And he was the one that called the helicopter. My girl gets in the helicopter after excruciating 45 minutes of me trying to keep her alive, while this other lady was helping my niece. And they were, one of them was taking the vital signs for my daughter, and the other one was on the phone. We drive 2.5 hours to the hospital. And there, we don't know what's happened. Imagine if your kid maybe was dead and you didn't know that she was, right? I didn't know I was going to be when I got there to the other side. Some neighbor from my church, and here again, Christianity is a blessing. My husband, I called my husband, and he found some Christian to take me from where I was in the middle of nowhere and all the way to Perth. And it's like I said, 2.5 hour drive. And I get there, and the nurses were like, oh, you were the mom. So she was such a funny kid. She was laughing and making us laugh. And I'm like, okay, she's conscious. I know just enough about psychology to realize that if you go unconscious in an accident, you'll be gone, right? And I can tell you that wound was so incredibly difficult to even look at. And I didn't think she could possibly be alive because I could see her brain. I was holding it together the whole time. I had taken CPR years earlier, and I was praying, okay, God, help me to remember. I knew just enough to not damage her spine permanently, because she did have a broken spine and a few vertebrae here and a broken foot. And anyway, so in all this, I am calm, right? I'm calm. I'm trying to stay calm. And I just think there's no way I can be calm unless God is helping me. And like Terry said, I put on Facebook right away because I knew I have my prayer warriors, and my husband's company are such wonderful people that are they're able to pray like nobody else I know. So, okay, so that day goes through. I'm at peace. I'm about to lose it when I see some of some Christians that are familiar to me, and they come and pray. Terry and I bonded over a blessing. Do you remember that, Terry? And these boys were there, and I recognized them, and I asked them for a prayer, for a blessing, and they did. And also the man that drove me. So I continue to be at peace. That's only one day, and it's felt like a month, right? But here's the one crucial story that I wanted to tell you. And I'm writing a book about this, and you'll have my contact info. When the book is ready, I would love to share it with you. Whoever is here in this conference, please, you have a free copy. I would love to have you read it and share it and give me some feedback, because I want to be able to send it out there to people that care about Christ, they care about miracles, and have you guys send me feedback to see if I'm missing something in him. And I'll communicate with Terry about this. But anyway, so here's a crucial moment that I had told these ladies before. So the next day, I spent the whole night with this girl. My niece is right next to me. We have miracle after miracle. The kid is alive. The nurses say that she was so embarrassed by her arm cuttings that she even talked about it with them. What an interesting thing. This 12-year-old said, I'm so sorry. I didn't appreciate my life. I was so frustrated and I was cutting myself. But look, I want to live. I want to live. Help me out. Right? And I wasn't there, but the nurses were telling me this. And I thought, okay, that's why the sweatshirt. And so obviously she was having eating disorders, some kind of depression, anxiety, whatever it is, cutting, self-harm. And here I did not have time to feel small and feel like, oh my gosh, well, I'm such a bad mother, right? Because luckily I had gone through that older son that I told you about and those 10 years have prepared me for this moment to think, it doesn't matter what I think about myself. Right now I need to be present. God needs to give me instructions because I cannot deal with this without him. So I'm praying and reading scripture every morning. I am fasting the whole day. I know we fast event. I am fasting for 2 days now. No sleep, no food, no husband, because it takes a whole day to get back from Utah to Australia. But it was 3 days on my own. Okay, this is my closing story about this, and then I'll leave you to read the book. And she's alive, and she's wonderful, and she's happy, and she loves me. The end of the story is beautiful, right? But here's the thing that happened that I think is very, very important. So next morning, I haven't slept all day. No, next evening. And I'm sitting there and I'm completely awake because how can you possibly sleep? Sitting by my girl, she has 25 machines, every corner of her body, anywhere that it could be a needle, there was a needle, putting her living things just to keep her alive. She's on a coma, of course, an intentional coma, so that she could heal, waiting for her operation. So I'm sitting there and I don't know very much detail because I'm just in the ICU. And all of a sudden, the Spirit tells me, just like He told me this morning, ask Derry the time, right? It's just a little tiny whisper. And the Spirit says, get up and walk to the hallway. And I'm like, I'm not going to leave my kid alone. The nurse wasn't in the room. And my niece was 12, right? And I'm like, get up and walk to the hallway. How many times have we had that? Little tiny whispers and we think, what are you talking about? Why would I get up and walk to the hallway? But, after 3 or 4 times, I thought, oh, okay, fine. And, the Spirit speaks to me through chills. I just get chills. So, so I get up, I start walking, and I stopped and I slept again. And all of a sudden, I see this man walking by, this tall Middle Eastern man. He was just in regular clothes. Didn't know who he was. And then I pass him, and the Spirit just says, slow down, look at him. And I'm like, okay, I don't know who he is, And then we pass each other. And then he looks at me when I looked at him. He noticed that I looked at him, so he looked back, and then he turned around and he said, "Are you the American mom?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm the American mom," which is funny, right? Because here I'm the Guatemalan mom. I have an accent. And then he said to me, "Oh, just wanted to inform you that your daughter is having her operation on Tuesday." This was Sunday night. Tuesday, we'll operate on her. And I'm like, okay, right? and I'm like, yeah, well, great. No, thanks for letting me know. I appreciate it. And I thought, okay, then maybe that's why God wanted me to do that, to just know and feel at peace that Tuesday, almost 4 days from the operation, she'll have her operation. Anyway, so I start to walk thinking, okay, that was interesting. I'm glad I found the Spirit. I know something more than I did 5 minutes ago. And then the Spirit says, turn around and talk to him. Turn around and talk to him. Turn around and say, and call him. And I'm like, I don't know about you guys, but calling some guy that is in a rush out the door, knowing he's a doctor and he's late at night, he probably wants to go home. And he's intimidating. This tall Middle Eastern man. And I said, excuse me, doctor. And he's like, yes. And he turns around and looks at me like with his hand on the door. And I'm thinking, okay, God, tell me why I'm supposed to stop him. Tell me why. And I'm just like, doctor, I've tried to kind of make up some time so that I can have the words I need to ask him because God hasn't told me that. And he said, ask him why Tuesday. Ask him if it is for convenience or if it is the best thing for your daughter. I don't know about you guys, but I don't usually go asking doctors to question why they're doing what they're doing. There's something about doctors that I hope they're not, that anybody that is a doctor in the call doesn't feel offended, but there's a godlike thing. I'm a doctor. I know what I'm doing. So anyway, I asked him. I said, doctor, excuse me, I just wanted to know if this is for convenience or if it is the right thing for my daughter. And he just looks at me like, what the heck? You must be an American. What an empowered little woman. Why would she be asking and questioning? But he answered and he said, you know what? I don't know. I'll ask the team. And get back to you. And then I felt that peace, and my daughter still haven't eaten or slept or anything. I'm still fasting. Next morning, first thing in the morning, if you have had children in hospitals or if you've been in a hospital, first thing in the morning, the doctors show up like at 6 a.m. or so, and I was there, luckily. And he came back and he said, Mrs. Fletcher, we talked about it. And we decided that it was just convenience because we had a training. But we think that maybe we should postpone our training and we'll operate on daughter first thing today. That would have been Monday. And they're getting her ready. We're going to get her ready anyway. Okay, so the relevance of this story, and I have exactly not even a minute, during that operation, they thought it was going to be simple. Oh, it's just a cut, right? To doctors, it's just a cut. And when they were cleaning up the wound and sealing it up, they realized the brain has started to swell. It's swelling so fast and so much that they literally, luckily she was under anesthetic, they were able to cut half the skull. They literally cut it, they removed it, put it in a freezer. And that operation, that should have been like a 3-hour thing, they told me. I'm just going to clean it up and stitch it up and you can be home by Christmas. We didn't come home until Valentine's Day. This gives you an idea about the seriousness of the event. If I wouldn't have asked the doctor this, my daughter will not be here. Or she might be here in a wheelchair or unable to speak or any of those things. So I want to testify to you. When God tells you something, even if it seems ridiculous or embarrassing, and you are the one that has a stewardship over that person. It could be a neighbor, it could be your child, it could be anything, it could be yourself. And she was meant to live, right? There are many cases when people are not meant to live, and that's okay. God's will is God's will. But my child was meant to live, and I was the only one that was her mentor at that moment. So testify to you, listen to that voice, act on that voice. It doesn't matter if you don't have an MD, it doesn't matter if you're not a PhD, it doesn't matter anything. God knows more than we could ever know. And thanks so much. And I'll send that book to, and Terry can tell you how you can get the rest of the story.
Amen. Thank you so much, Deborah. We're so overjoyed with your sharing of that story. It just really impacted me. Terry, did you want to say anything at this point or ask any other questions? But I think this has really blessed me. Your story has been amazing from day one when I joined the prayer team to start praying for your daughter. And we're living in a day now. It's where people have not been experiencing or seeing signs, wonders, and miracles. And, when you think about the time that it happened until now, how God just really worked a miracle in your daughter's life. And I'm just so grateful to be connected with you today. And, as the word of God said, we will do greater works, even though we sometimes get, fearful or don't know what direction we're going in, but God has already equipped us and empowered us to pray healing and anointing and restoration for those who are hurting, broken, in need of a savior. So thank you again. Appreciate you. God bless you.